Hello, welcome to another program of the series about Camille Flammarion. I'll invite Charles Kempf to the studio. Hello, Charles. How are
Hello,
you?
Munir. Hello, everyone. Very happy to be here again with you all.
Thank you so much, Charles. It's a pleasure to have you here. So I say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's a pleasure to welcome you all. And today we are going for the second part of the biography of Camille Flammarion. Charles made a tremendous work, and the biography of Camille Flammarion is really, really rich, packed with a lot of very interesting information. So we decided to split this initial presentation of the year in three parts. And today we are going to have the second one. We had the first one on the 7th of January, and we'll have the third and final one next Sunday at the same time. So with this, we end this very nice work of Charles divided into three presentations. And I hope he becomes a reference for people who want to know more about Camille Flammarion and his work, and that's our expectation. So, Charles, I think I don't need to introduce you again. So I'll hand it over to you so we can, pick up from where we left last time, and I'm sure it's going to be brilliant again. So I'll hand it over to you, Charles.
Thank you so much, Munir. Thank you all for being here. Yes, I wanted to do it in one, but it was not possible. So uh, we decided to do it in three parts. And first part was 7th of January. You can still see the videos, the record on YouTube, and then the channels of Spiritist Center for Peace. Today will be the second part, and next week, next Sunday, same time, will be the third and I hopefully last part. Okay. So the subject is Camille Flammarion, Biography and Discourse on Kardec's Tomb. We have seen his biography 2 weeks ago. So he's born in France in 1842, and close to Domremy, which where is the birthplace of John of Arc. So it's about 30 kilometers, and it's about 80 kilometers of Fougue, where Léon Denis was born, and this is his father and his mother. So very simple people. You can see farmer and a small shop. And he had also he was the older son of one brother and two sisters. This we have seen the last time. We have seen also all the first steps of his life. So he was very um, young, good student, and interested in science. So we could recognize in the child a spirit who had already some journeys of evolution behind him. And then we have seen also how he went to Paris. His father went to Paris and he joined them after finishing some studies. So he started in Paris with a very hard work uh, in a workshop. And he wrote a manuscript of a book. He has been detected by a doctor who came to assist him when he was ill. And then this doctor saw immediately the huge potential he had and introduced him to the Paris Observatory, where he was hired by Mr. Le Verrier when he was 16 years old to make calculations, astronomical calculations. And that is then when he started his journey, his career of in astronomy. He could also perform some studies, albeit quite limited. And then very soon he started also disseminating by conferences and also writing books. Okay. He met Kardec in 1860, as we have seen. No, in November 1860. let me see. Yes, in November 1860, so he was quite young, and he knew Kardec, and he then participated to the Spiritist Society of Paris, managed by Allan Kardec himself. He also was following another Spiritist group, which was in Paris, the Spiritist group of Miss Huet, and he also wrote his first book, who was studying the conditions of the plurality of inhabited worlds, and that was not well perceived by Mr. Leverrier, who fired him from the laboratory, but fortunately he found immediately another job. Mr. Leverrier was a difficult person, a good scientist, but very harsh character, and he had a lot of enemies somehow, and all the enemies turned into friends of Camille Flammarion, so they hired him immediately in the Longitude office in Paris, where he continued working. He also started installing on the roof of the flat where he was living in Paris a small observatory. And he continued writing some studies he continued in contact with Allan Kardec. And here you can see one example. Kardec published 3 communications that were received by Camille Flammarion in the Revue Spirit of September 1862, you see. So uranographic studies, medium Mr. Flammarion. So Kardec was generally hiding the name of the mediums unless he got approval of them to put it in the full name. So he got the approval of Flammarion to put his name. And that was a communication received by 3 communications received by Flammarion as a medium when he was acting in the Paris Society of Spiritist studies. We also I showed you last time, that was right at the end, some originals that we found. You can see here this one, session of 8th of May 1863, medium Mr. Flammarion. So that is the last one in date we found, and the title is The Eternal Succession of the Worlds. And here you can see this letter is from Camille Flammarion himself, and the corrections you can see have been done by Kardec, because he used this in order to publish either in the Revue Spirit or in his last book, which was the Genesis, where all this part of material genesis, uranography, was mostly based on this mediumistic writing received by Camille Flammarion through the spirit of Galileo. Okay, here you can see also the cover page of his first book. Kardec wrote an appreciation in the Spiritist magazine. It was in January 1863. The book is dated 1862. And you can see the comment that I think we read as the last slide 2 weeks ago. Very positive, and saying young people, in 1862, he was only 18 years old. Sorry, let me just think. No, 42. He was 20 years old, sorry, when he wrote this book, and Kardec making the comment, of an age when others are still in school, had the time to appropriate them, and even more, so to deepen them. This is for us clear proof that his spirit is not at his beginning, so it's an evolved spirit who incarnated in Camille Flammarion, or that without knowing he was assisted by another spirit. And you can see here the remark already of Allan Kardec, without knowing or without perceiving, Flammarion was probably inspired even in the works he made in the field of astronomy. Okay? Because we will come back on this subject a little bit later. So this first book had a big success. You see, 1864, it was already the second edition, who was done by Didier. Didier was a friend of Kardec. He had a publishing company publishing a lot of books, including the books of Kardec and the second edition of this book of Flammarion. Which he revised, increasing the content and also including a philosophical part. Okay, and Camille Flammarion became very famous thanks of this book. The book got very positive appreciation by extremely known people in France, like Henri Martin, which was one of the biggest specialist of historian in French, Victor Hugo even, positive comments, and up to Napoleon III, who also appreciated this book. But on another hand, this success, there is always a price to pay. He faced also severe critics by ultra-clerical papers because he was somehow entering into the field which was reserved for the leaders of the official religions. Okay. Camille Flammarion was also a pacifist. So in this book, this is what you can read, and we will read it because it's very interesting. It's like a message he sent to the inhabitants of other worlds about our humanity. So let's read it. Men who are already at the head of the perpetual battle that living beings engage in on Earth have further pushed this disastrous law to the extreme by turning it against themselves, and from the beginning, in the midst of the most advanced civilization, as well as in the heart of the barbarism, iniquitous, senseless war has held to the reins of human nations. So you can see he's really talking severely about the humanity, which is still having too many wars. And on top of that, let's go on. Would you believe it? Peaceful people of space. Man arrived at such an aberration here that he makes a goddess of this war and adores it. Yes, the inhabitants of the earth contemplate with veneration this hungry Moloch. And by mutual agreement, they give the palm of honors and the diadem of glory to the cruelest amongst them, whose skill in carnage is the greatest. This is our world. Glory to him who piles up corpses on the reddened plains. Glory to him who fills the gaps. Glory to him whose frenzied ardor enlists the most tigers around his bloody banner and makes hordes of executioners march on the stomachs of torn nations. So you can see his critique is quite severe about this cult of war that was still governing the heroes, the generals, marshals, and the big French grand army of Napoleon I and so on. And Camille Flammarion was really out of all that, and he was basically in his heart he was a pacifist. I told also 2 weeks ago, how he managed to escape from serving the military duty because it was absolutely not what he wanted in his life, and since very young he had this pacifist ideal in himself. 1863, so he started writing in some French magazines. So the first one was Revue Française, where he wrote an article entitled Spirits and Spiritism. And it's quite interesting because he somehow disseminating Spiritism in quite famous newspapers. And this first article, part 1, got positive comment by Kardec in Revue Spirit, Spiritist magazine, April 1863. Nevertheless, there was a part 2 where Camille Flammarion expressed his doubts about the spirit's origin of the spirit communications, examining his personal case, as we will see. He was always in doubt that, between this eternal question of spiritism, that it came from his own spirit or own soul and not from a third spirit. This is this famous debate between animism and spiritism that is existing in the spiritist and spiritualist environment. So Kardec clearly explained him, as you have seen. Why did Galileo select Camille Flammarion, who had already some knowledge in astronomy, to give communication about astronomy? It's exactly for this reason. Because he had already the knowledge, it was much easier for the spirit to give a communication in this field than giving it through a medium who had absolutely no clue about astronomy. Now, the other side of this is the doubt of the medium himself. Yes, what I wrote, I could have written it myself, and always this doubt. Nevertheless, what is important is the result, and the result is good at the point that Kardec published it in the Genesis, one of the 5 books of the codification. And what was written there in the formation of the solar system, and how did the moon come out of the earth, and so on. But the theories which were presented 150 or almost 160 years ago are still the ones which are valid today. So it was quite well inspired by Galileo, even if Camille Flammarion had some doubt about this. So that is why Kardec remained silent. He commented the first article, but not the second one, because it's probably because Camille Flammarion was expressing these doubts. Okay. So let's see exactly what was Camille Flammarion's opinion. If the spiritist system had been imagined to explain the observed phenomena, we see from the preceding discussion that it would still be the most complete and the most admissible. So Camille Flammarion recognized that the spiritist explanation was the best, albeit he never went to the point to take, yes, it is absolutely sure that it is the origin. So it was more an attitude of prudence than a disbelief, because he was clearly saying it seems the best explanation today. But there is a very important circumstance to note here, which is that while these theories have been presented purely and simply as conjectural opinions, which experience alone could confirm or annul, Spiritism has revealed itself as its own cause. The doctrine based on the manifestations of the Spirit was presented and accredited itself. So, in other words, it's one of the character of the Spiritist revelation that the first communication came, and it is through the communication that the communicators, between brackets, said, we are spirits, we were human, we passed away, now we are in the spiritual world, we continue with our individuality, and we are transmitting these messages to you. So this is what Camille Flammarion is mentioning here. So it was not an invention by Kardec or an hypothesis that came from Earth. The hypothesis or the explanation or the declaration of the origin came from the spirits themselves. So Camille Flammarion, so the Genesis was not written yet. The character of Spiritist revelations, chapter 1, where Kardec develops this point, was not written yet at that time. But Camille Flammarion could perceive, this character of the spirit, of this particularity of the Spiritist revelation. He continues, although we have acquired the absolute certainty that these facts exist, although the Spiritist theories seems to us the only admissible one today, so you see, he's very clear, the facts, there is no doubt, the theory brought by Spiritist teaching is the only admissible today. Then he continues, it does not seem impossible to us that the future will one day open up to us in this order of things, horizons unknown that would change our way of seeing. The poet Lemierre has said with great reason, believing everything discovered is a profound error. It is taking the horizon as the boundaries of the world. So you see here this statement expresses clearly the prudent attitude he had. He said, yes, the explanation that it comes from spirit seems really the best one nowadays. But we cannot say there is nothing more to discover, nothing more to study. The future may, reserve us some surprises, and we may discover other things. And this is one particularity of science. You see, the law of universal attraction, Newton's law, was very clear until there were some anomalies, including the period of the orbit of Mercurio around the Sun, as we have told it, that Le Verrier was eagerly seeking the reason. And the real reason has only been found by Einstein with a change of paradigm to the classical mechanics to the relativist theory. And this is something that Camille Flammarion said it may happen also in the Spiritist theory. So we must, I'm convinced really that the origin comes from the spirits, albeit we know this problem of animism. There is always a mixture of a part coming from the spirits and a part coming from the medium soul itself. But to say that it is zero coming from the spirit, I'm absolutely convinced it's not the case. But nevertheless, I respect this prudent attitude of Flammarion, particularly because he says, yes, the facts exist, and yes, the Spiritist explication is so far the best one. And he was writing this in 1863, as we have seen. Today, we have 160 years later. But today, 160 years later, still, I do not see any better explanation. So this future Camille Flammarion mentioned here in this statement did not happen yet, more than 1.5 centuries later. Okay. And this sentence of the poet Lemierre is really very strong and totally valid, because you had some scientists at that time who said, now science is finished, there is nothing more to discover. Like Laplace or some others. And all what happened in the meantime showed that they were deeply wrong and that Lemierre is right. So we have to always stay very humble. And this is a big lesson that Camille Flammarion brings us through this statement. And who still tells us that Spiritism does not offer an entirely new path foreign to that, but open in the field of psychology, a path which will lead to the study of the faculties of the soul, and by which we will perhaps finally arrive at knowing ourselves. It would be no less beautiful. So let us not hasten to conclude. In just a few decades, if God gives it life, Spiritism will tell us its greatness and its power, will reveal to us its intrinsic nature and its way of being, will prove to us its influence and its practical usefulness. Until then, it will be permissible not to share an absolute certainty about the first cause of such wonderful things. You see, absolute certainty is also not a prudent scientific attitude. So again, I mean, his position and his way of reasoning is, of course, he expresses some doubts, but nevertheless, he stays deeply spiritualist, deeply also believing in God, so through the books he wrote later. And that is what I would say the most important. So this future, as he sold only a few decades, you see, we are quite some decades now, and still there is no better explanation. Albeit the decades after Kardec, there were a lot of studies in psychic phenomenon, psychic Society for Psychical Research, for instance, William Crookes, Katie King, Institut Métapsychique International, and so on and so on. So huge quantity of studies, new phenomenon, ectoplasm, some theories about that. So science really progressed a lot in this field of psychology. Nevertheless, one point that Camille Flammarion was, it means spiritualist, the current science mainstream still did not yet open to this spiritualist paradigm and still remains with the blinds, reducing itself to the materialist paradigm. In other words, nothing does exist out of the matter. And this is, of course, limiting a lot the thinking, the thoughts, the use of the intelligence of all these people to conceptualize better. So this statement of Camille Flammarion still remains valid today. And he was a little bit too optimistic, saying just a few decades, okay, maybe a little bit more than a few, maybe a little bit more than a century, maybe 2 centuries, who knows? But for sure, one day we will get there. And why all this? Because a lot of his colleagues were either following traditional religion on one side, or were materialists, as scientifics. And this was this double influence on him, who was spiritualist and believing in God openly. He was a little bit, how to say, an exception in the scientific milieu. And all these influences, remember that he was still 20, just above 20 years old, induced a bit the troubled state of his soul and justified his prudent attitude. Okay. He was invited also to several salons in Paris. You know, that was, you can see here a lot of names, Boissy, Ancelot, Tocqueville, all these people very famous, inviting a lot of other very famous people. So with 20 years, Camille Flammarion really saw and met and knew most of the famous people who were around in Paris at that time. So that was really, how to say, a big trigger. All this as a consequence of the publication of this first book, who made him to be fired by Le Verrier, but who gave him this reconnaissance. He was recognized by the society, most of the society in Paris. Nevertheless, he wrote, he always preferred spend his time working rather than spending too much time in social events in this salon. It was not his character. His character was really hard worker. Okay. And indeed, he started, you have seen the publication in one magazine. He started also in another magazine in June, the Cosmos, Revue Encyclopédique, where there were several scientific authors. And June was his first publication in this magazine that you can find also in the French National Library. You can download it for free. And then this first one was followed by regular collaboration until 1869, sorry. And that all this publication helped also to make Camille Flammarion even more popular. Okay. He met, amongst all these people he met, of course, he had sometimes more affinity with one or the other. And one with whom he had this affinity was this Ferdinand Höfer. So Ferdinand Höfer was a German who came to Paris. He was also in the middle of the science, but he saw immediately the negative, also the negative aspects of the scientific milieu. And Flammarion writes about Hoefer that he owed to him to have appreciated early on two non-vulgar axioms. The first is that the search for fortune and the ambition for honors are incompatible with the true happiness of the spirit. So you see, the money does not make us happy. And this is something which goes in the way which is also encouraged by Spiritist body of knowledge, is the disinterestedness. And the Hoefer wrote that because the biggest problem of science at that time was the lack of disinterestedness of the scientists themselves. So they were sometimes hiding from one to the other, not collaborating as they should, looking for personal career, for having better jobs and more remuneration and so on. And this is really a poison in science. And so Camille Flammarion, with 20 and some years old, learned this, 21 years old, learned this. And the second axiom is official science is not the guarantee of truth. Another statement which is encouraging to the humility. So you see humility and disinterestedness. So this he got thanks to Hoefer. Hoefer had a house in the campaign in Paris, so Flammarion went there from time to time. He was invited by Hoefer, and with a big park, looking nature and so on. It was a little bit a way to escape from Paris, from the city, and also to take benefit of the wise teaching and ideas of this Ferdinand Hoefer. Goodness, writes Flammarion, this virtue so necessary in the general commerce of humanity, does not seem to be, moreover, the essential quality of academicians. So it is quite a critic he is doing here, again, because of this. And today, you know, I always transpose these writings of Flammarion in today. There is even a rejection of scientific authority. Why? Because of this lack of disinterestedness. You have people coming with good products like medicine, like vaccine, and so on. But the people don't believe. They say, no, they are paid by the lobby of the pharmacians and pharmaceutic industry, and so on and so on. So the people are rejecting the scientific authority. Why? Exactly because of this reason, lack of disinterestedness. And really, I think if the science wants to recover its authority today, it really must go in the sense of these two sentences, or these three statements which are here, disinterestedness and humility. Otherwise, the Vox Populi, as we said today, will have some doubts. Are they really honest, or are they financially influenced to try to sell us something that we don't need or whatsoever? And it's exactly the problem we see today. As for me, I am the servant of free thought. I'm for freedom and independence and against all those who claim to impose chains on us. He has been contacted, of course, by a lot of people like Freemasons and so on. But he always refused to adhere. And this is a statement he made at that moment. I prefer to remain free, absolutely free. So, you know, he was understood very well also this law of liberty, or the law of freedom, which is one of the 10 fundamental moral laws as per the Spiritist body of knowledge. 1864, in the Spiritist magazine, Kardec published an article from Camille Flammarion, because Camille Flammarion, since he was so known, a lot of people started already at that time to send him letters saying, oh, look, this and that phenomenon occurred here with this and that details and this and that people who were witnessing it, and so on and so on. So Camille Flammarion had spent during his whole life from that point and until the end, he got spontaneously a lot of fact, and this helped him a lot to write his article, including in the Spiritist magazine, as you can see, but also his books, the books he wrote, were always reproducing a big number of facts that he was collecting. Okay, so in the Spiritist magazine, 1864, you can see this article, Fontenelle and the Polterous Spirit, which was a phenomenon happening close to Paris and also in the history. August 1864, he started publishing in another newspaper, which was Magasin Pittoresque, quaint store. And here you see, for instance, the article he wrote, "How do we determine the distance from stars until the Earth?" And he's describing this method that is quite well known. The Earth is turning around the sun, so there is quite a distance between when it's in one side and in the other side of the ellipse. And then you get an angle in which you can appreciating the star, looking how it's moving. And from that, you can make an estimation of the distance. Today, of course, there are some other means, but he was, you see, 1864 already publishing articles of this kind, astronomical article in this magazine. This magazine had also very famous collaborators like Jean Reynaud, and in this magazine, he was working together with Henri Martin, the famous historian specialist I just talked about, who wrote a lot of excellent book about history in France. It's a reference in the 19th century for historian. So again, the young Camille Flammarion was already, how to say, having exchanges and contact with such famous people. 1865, he wrote his second book, is Les mondes imaginaires et les mondes réels, Imaginary Worlds and Real Worlds. It was a kind of a complement to the Plurality of Inhabited Worlds, which was the first book he wrote. And he made really a review of the human theories about extraterrestrian or inhabitants of other worlds. The first part of his book, the title is Scenic Astronomical Journey in the Sky. So it's kind of taking the readers for a travel in the sky. Second part, it's a critical review, as I just told, of the theories of inhabitants of the other planets which were existing at that time. So that is his second book, 1865. He had 23 years. Okay. He also, the comments of the press were again on this second book very positive. And here you see coming out of a very famous journal which was called Le Siècle, a newspaper, daily newspaper, 4th of October 1865. And this comment was signed by another famous writer in France, which was Louis Jourdan, and very positive. 1865, he already also started to publish yearly an annuary or a directory of astronomical and meteorological phenomena that would occur every year. Okay, and this publication, who started in 1865, he really every year for the year to come, he was publishing in it, showing all the full moon, new moon, and so on, and the eclipse. Everything was in this calendar, including maps, as you can see, showing the position of the planets in the given year, in the given months. And this publication, so he published it until he died in 1925, but it continued afterwards until 1965, because the widow, this is more or less when the widow of Camille Flammarion, his second wife, died in 1965. So again, a huge part of his work. that started when he was 23 years old. And the same year, the fourth book, The Wonders of the Sky, you can see, readings of the evening. This is done, as you can see, Librairie Hachette. So Librairie Hachette is specialized in very popular book, very cheap, but huge volume. And he started writing for Hachette then a text about, you see, the wonders of the sky in a very simple and accessible language. 5,500 prints sold in less than a year. So this book had also a huge success. He became even much more popular. And this brought him even some earnings. So he was always living from his salary in the Longitude office. And there he started to earn some money also from the books. But the first earning of the books, you see, 500 francs and 25 gold coins, louis d'or, revenue. He had some friends who just married and who had huge financial difficulties, and he just went there and hiddenly offered them what he gained. So clearly, this is one of the proof of his disinterestedness. He was not doing that for money. He was doing that for science and for popularizing and for educating and for helping, and even helping his friends who had some difficulties. And in this book, it's very interesting, very simple language. It has been, you can see maps like this one. I'm not sure it's very visible. So it is a map of the sky showing, you see, Cancer, scorpions, fish, Aquarius, and so on, and showing how the stars with the images of these zodiac signs in order to facilitate the understandings of where all this comes from. And this book, so popular, you see, the year after, it was 1866, 32 years later, it was already translated and published into Spanish. Okay. August 1865, he took some holidays. Yes. He traveled to Le Havre and Saint-Adresse. Look at this, because he never saw the sea. So the first time he saw the sea was then in August 1865 when he was 24 years old. And 23 years old, sorry. And very interestingly, he went to Saint-Adresse. Of course, it's the sea which is one of the coast which is the closest from Paris, in Le Havre, and the Seine River just flows that direction. So you can go either by train or by ship if you want. And interestingly, this was 2 years after Kardec. So Kardec also traveled to Saint-Adresse in summer 1863, more or less 2 years before, August 1863. And Kardec rented a small house on the beach, and he was very quiet, alone. Amélie stayed in Paris to manage the daily business of the Spiritist magazine and all the visits and so on. And that is where Kardec wrote the Gospel according to Spiritism. And you see, so Flammarion followed very closely, just 2 years later, the same steps as Kardec. October, same year, still the fifth book. This book is not signed Camille Flammarion, but it is signed Hermès. Nevertheless, it is known today that Camille Flammarion used this pseudo, again published by Didier, the same who published Spiritist books. And the title of the book is Unknown Natural Forces. So this is a book that we know because it had several revisions. It was quite small in this first publication. And this first publication was Flammarion answer to a huge controversy that happened in Paris after the show of the Davenport brothers, who made happen some spiritist phenomenon in Paris. Of course, they asked for money. They came from US, and albeit some of the phenomenon seemed to be authentic, some others clearly were fake, and they have been caught in this, and that made a huge mess in Paris. A huge rejection. Kardec is also commenting a lot these Davenport brothers episodes in the Spiritist magazine. And Camille Flammarion took the defense, saying, no, everything is not, of course, he did not support Davenport brothers, but he called the attention that there are phenomena, natural forces that are still unknown today. And that was then the origin of this book that he revised later on. In the appendix of this first edition, he also is describing a séance which has been held in the Palais of Saint-Cloud in presence of the Emperor and the Empress. So the Davenport brothers made a séance in front of Napoleon III. And Camille Flammarion is describing, Hermes, under the pseudo of Hermes, and that is for sure the reason why he did not put his names. That would have maybe have been a little bit too strong. Maybe the emperor was not agreeing in having all these details published, but he did it. So it's quite interesting book as well, this one. And the increased editions that we know today are, you see, from 1907, 1909, and he always enriched the book, and today it's not more 152 pages, but rather something like 500, where he's adding all these phenomena that had been observed. At that time, it was mostly the turning table, but then, of course, with the time, it has been enriched by a lot of other observations. December, again, the same year, Mr. Didier, who was the publisher, died. And Camille Flammarion is writing, I had the regret, the sorrow, the pain of losing sometime later, December 5th, the publisher Didier, who had taken such a deep affection for me and had offered his very paternal protection at the beginning of my career. I was asked to deliver a speech at his grave summarizing his life. I accepted, but I was rarely more moved than in the accomplishment of this sad duty. So again, he was only 23 years old, and he had already to make a speech on the grave of Mr. Didier. And other comments about this death of Mr. Didier can be found in the Revue Spirit, Spiritist Review of Kardec, January 1866. And Camille Flammarion, he's making a comment which is where somehow he's also justifying his doubts. He's writing, Mr. Didier, also promised to come forward and to give me some posthumous signs, but Camille Flammarion never got anything from Mr. Didier. And this was, how to say, maybe the element he was missing to really believe stronger in the spirit origin of the communication and of these signs. But for sure, there was a superior reason for this that he did not get, because I think the spirituality wanted him to perform the mission as he performed it, means staying prudent, not going too strongly, too openly into this field. And we will see later on the discourse on the tomb of Allan Kardec, he's explaining a little bit better the reasons. Okay. He joined also, this journal Le Siècle, who wrote about him, invited him, okay, please join our redaction team. And then this was really a newspaper, 60,000 prints daily. And he was a scientific collaborator. And his first article was 12th of January, 1866. You can see the title. It's What is the Chemical Composition of the stars revealed by the analysis of their light. So it was the beginning of the spectral analysis to determine the percentage of oxygen, hydrogen, and water or whatsoever. You see already in 1866, and that was what the first article he wrote in this new paper. Here you can see a picture of him, 1866, so 24 years old. It was from, how to say, taking from a book he published. And 1865, also he had a kind of, this idea of relativity that Einstein developed in 1905, means 40 years later, something was already in the air. Look at what he wrote. I published in 1864 in the magazine Pittoresque, the magazine, a note on the delay caused in our observation of the aspects of the stars by the time that the light rays take to come from these stars to us. I was thinking about it in a half dream, when suddenly the following thought struck my mind. Since we see the stars from a delay of several years caused by the duration of the journey of their light to us, likewise, from these stars, the history of the Earth is behind by the same amount, and from such a star, the observers who could distinguish our planet would see it currently not as it is today, but as it was at the moment when the ray of light which arrived there left, as it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, depending on the distance. You see, the relativity of space and time. So the idea was clearly already in the air. So of course, it was not yet E is equal to M times C square. It was not at that point. Nevertheless, this idea of relativity was already existing somehow. And Camille Flammarion is complementing. My Lumen astronomical novel had just spontaneously created itself in my mind. And this Lumen novel was really also extremely popular. You see, more than 100,000 prints in 1910. And here it is, published in 1967, so close after this half dream he had, where he had this idea. Again, you see, spiritist inspiration, or seeing the spirits, taking advices from them, and remembering by waking up. So the book was not a book at the beginning. It was published in a magazine called L'Artiste, starting 1st of February 1867. The second publication of this novel was in 1873 in another newspaper entitled Récit de l'Infini, and it got a separate publication and book only since 1887. Okay. Again in 1865, on top of his books and writings in magazine, Camille Flammarion started also to give lectures and to teach popular astronomy every Thursday evening at the Polytechnic Association. So that was an association giving lessons for free, and where he, when he had no money, when he was working and very poor, got the instruction could complement his studies. And he gave these conferences in an auditorium of the Turgot School, who had a capacity of some 100 people, but it was too small, far too small. There was a lot of people in the corridors and so on. So again, as per part of this Polytechnic Association, he asked to see the Minister of Public Instruction, and the minister received him because he knew him already. And in order to find a solution, to find a bigger room and so on for those conferences. And so Camille Flammarion stayed very good friend of Victor Duruy later on. So he had his entries, as we can say, or even at level of ministries. Okay. 1866, he spent 1 month's holiday in his birth region. and let him talk about it. Getting off the carriage at Chaumont train station, I was quite surprised to see the platform full of people and the deputation of the main people of the city accompanying the host who had invited me to stay at his house, Mr. Geoffroy from Montigny, checker of weights and measures. They came to celebrate the child of the country, whose visit was preceded by an already widespread notoriety, and during the 6 weeks that I was able to devote to Haute-Marne, I remained under the spell of a perpetual and very unexpected triumph. So he was really got very popular even where he was born, not only in Paris. Huh? Each Sunday in August was devoted to a conference. The first at the town hall of Langres, my native district. The second at the Chaumont Theatre. The third in Bourbon-les-Bains. The fourth in Saint-Dizier. Then I had to continue further to Vassy and Nogent. I had initially thought of giving only two in Langres and Chaumont, but they both had such a resonance that I could not refuse the pressing invitation from the other towns. These conferences were public and free. Again, you see the disinterestedness. 1867, seventh book, one of the most famous of him, Dieu dans la nature, God in nature. It was a kind of an answer to the new German philosophy that was existing at that time. Virchow, Büchner, Moleskott, this hard, materialistic, pessimistic, negative, atheist philosophy. He answered them by this book, God in Nature, and it's one of the really best book he wrote. I would add also several editions. This book is composed of introduction. The book first, Force and Matter. Book two, The Life, which is still today scientifically studied, but the origin is not explained. How did it appear on Earth? Book third, The Soul, you see, God, but also spiritualist. Book fourth, Destiny of the Being and of the Things. And the book five, to close, is God, so which is the first cause of all these things. So you see, this belief in God and the belief in the spirit, independent of matter, were really the main lines he followed throughout all his career. First edition, so May 67, he wrote it. And here you can see the fifth edition, which was 1869. 1867, again, eighth book, Studies and Readings on Astronomies. And this was a little bit more specialized for astronomers. And this first book was followed by 8 other volumes, 9 volumes in total until 1880. At that time, 1866, Flammarion got his own telescope that he installed in the roof of the flat he was living in Paris, and starting also to make his own observations. And also something that he started, 30th of May 1867, he made his first observation from a balloon. So the balloon where, of course, Montgolfier was quite almost a century before, but the balloons were really insecure. There was not a lot of unsafe. You had to be very careful. And it is through the minister who he got born. He joined a society of balloons in Paris, but they had no balloons. There was a society with no balloons. And Camille Flammarion managed to get the balloons of the emperor. Why? Because the emperor, since it was not safe, even the emperor did not use the balloon, and then he granted to rent it. And Camille Flammarion made several travels in the balloon, making observations, not only astronomical, but also of the clouds, meteorology, and scientific observations in general. This is a picture of him in 1867, though, when he was 25 years old. And between 1867 and 1880, he made 12 balloon air travels. One of them, he started in Paris and he landed in Prussia, so in north of Germany, flying over Belgium and whatsoever. And it was quite also audacious to do it, because only a few years later there was the war of the Prussians against France. And he wrote also a book about this. You can see Voyage en Ballon. He make some conferences about that. You can see the image of the balloon, and on the bottom left, he was observing the balloon and the shadow of the balloon on the clouds. So he was really observing. Every opportunity for him to observe something was really taken. And this was then his 9th book. Okay. 1867 again, he joined this teaching league, Ligue de l'Enseignement, who has been founded by Jean Massé. And he himself is writing, one fine day in June of the year 1867, I received a visit from a deputation composed of Mr. Emmanuel Vauchez, maybe not so known in English, but known in the Spiritist milieu in France, Delanne. Of course, it was not Gabriel, but it was Alexander, the father, because Gabriel was only 10 years old at that time. Lemarie, which was, yes, Pierre Gaëtan Lemarie, who was also Freemason and participated to this teaching league. And you see some other names. Coming from Jean Massé to explain me the importance of this work from the point of view of popular education. And you know that popular education, making conferences for free, giving lessons in this Polytechnic Association and so on, it was really also an ideal of Camille Flammarion. The need to create a similar circle in Paris, asking me to be its president. And indeed, he decided, he accepted, and he was the first president of the Parisian Ligue de l'Enseignement, was Camille Flammarion. He accepted to have the presidency during the first year. And Camille Flammarion still commenting, we therefore decided to meet at the home of a less monopolized and more isolated man, and we chose Mr. Delanne, who lived on Rue Saint-Denis, number 319. So this is an address known also by the Spiritist. This was the first headquarters of the Parisian Circle of the Teaching League, having Camille Flammarion as president and Emmanuel Vauchez as secretary. And here you have a picture of Emmanuel Vauchez. Mr. Delanne's son, continues Camille Flammarion, then very young, 10 years old, became the distinguished engineer and writer we know. This he wrote then in 1910, when Gabriel Delanne was already known. So there was a huge respect between Gabriel Delanne and Camille Flammarion. 1869, he wrote his 11th book. So Consolations of Travel, in Travel, or The Last Day of a Philosopher. So it's a book from Sir Humphrey Davy, written in English, and he found this book in a bookstore in Jersey during a leisure travel, and he read the book and decided to translate it. Why? Because Humphrey Davy was really a strong sustainer of spiritualist philosophy of science. Means you see this famous spiritualist paradigm that science is still resisting nowadays. Currently, there were a lot of philosophers, Camille Flammarion himself and Humphrey Davy, advocating for opening wider to the materialist paradigm, means opening to the spiritualist paradigm. And that is the reason why Camille Flammarion decided to translate this book in 1867. The book has been published then in 1869. And here you can see the 8th edition of 1883. Okay. 31st of March 1869, we come now to the death of Allan Kardec. Let's read Camille Flammarion. Although my work did not allow me any regular attendance at the meetings of the Spiritist Society, of which he was the founding president, Kardec, the committee of this society came to ask me, in its name and in that of Miss Allan Kardec, to preside over this civil funeral and to give a speech. I had stayed away for some time, not admitting that Spiritism could be the basis of a religion before the phenomenon had been scientifically demonstrated and explained. However, I accepted this honorable invitation and delivered a speech. You see here again a statement. He wanted further scientific demonstration before even, he said, turning into a religion. That was his vision at that time. Whilst, well, still Spiritism never turned into a religion, and except by some adepts, or in some countries like in Brazil, where Spiritism really is practiced as a religion. But here in France, it's absolutely not the case. There is a rejection of traditional religion. The people researching some alternative, looking for Spiritism, they don't look for a religion. They try to escape from a religion to find something else which talks more to the reason and to the common sense. So that's why Kardec also never said that Spiritism is a religion. So he was cautious, you see. Again, a lot of people, even in France, started to practice Spiritism a little bit like a religion. Oh, that's sure, it's like this, let's go and don't think about anymore, and so on. And that was not exactly the way of thinking of Camille Flammarion, you see. He really wanted to have more demonstrations about the cause of the phenomenon, albeit he admitted that the Spiritist explanation was the best, as we have seen. And he accepted the invitation and delivered the speech in the tomb of Kardec. So let's go through the speech. Let me see how many time we have. I think it will be, so it's 9 o'clock, so not sure we will be able to finish, but let's start. Here you have the cover page. It has been published as a separate booklet in 1865, the same year where Kardec died. And Flammarion is then starting his speech like this. In accepting with deference the sympathetic invitation of the friends of the laborious thinker, whose earthly body now lies at our feet, I remember a dark day in the month of December 1865. I then pronounced supreme words of farewell on the tomb of the founder of the academic library, the Honorable Didier, who was, as publisher, the convinced collaborator of Allan Kardec in the publication of the fundamental works of a doctrine that was dear to him and who also died suddenly. So he made the speech for Didier, and then when he made the speech for Kardec, he remembered that first speech he made. Today my task is even greater because I would like to be able to represent to the thoughts of those who hear me, and to that of the million of men who, in the New World, have dealt with the still mysterious problem of the phenomenon called Spiritist. Here he's talking about spiritualism in Americas. I would like, I say, to be able to represent to them the scientific interest and the philosophical future of the study of this phenomena. So see, again, foreseeing a bright future for Spiritism or spiritualism. I would like to show them what unknown horizons human thought will see opening up before it, as it extends its positive knowledge of the natural forces in action around us. Show them that such observations are the most effective antidote of the leprosy of atheism, which seems to particularly attack our era of transition. And finally, publicly testify here to the eminent service that the author of the Spirit's book has rendered to philosophy by calling attention and discussion to facts which, until then, belonged to the morbid and fatal domain of religion superstitions. Again, here you see the characteristic strong words It's a really sincere and strong recognizing of the work Kardec has made, but calling atheism as a leprosy, and calling religious superstition as morbid and fatal are very, very strong, you see. So he really is showing how Kardec escaped from this atheism that was very strong in the science, in the scientific community, and also these superstitions, which were also very strong into the traditional religion. By the way, where always this fight between science and religion, anti-clericalism during a lot of times. And Camille Flammarion here really seeing this new concept that Kardec brought in starting scientifically observations, studies of this phenomenon, who were belonging to the field of this religious superstition and not being blocked by the atheism and materialism of main science. So that is really the disruption that Kardec brought, and that is recognized here by Camille Flammarion right at the beginning of his speech. Let's continue. It would in fact be an important act to establish here before this eloquent tomb that the methodical examination of phenomena wrongly called supernatural, far from renewing the superstitious spirit and awakening the energy of reason, distances, on the contrary, the errors and illusions of ignorance, and serves progress better than the illegitimate negation of those who do not want to take the trouble to see. You see, very strong statement again. No, it's a natural, it's a fact. So it's a duty of science to observe and to study this phenomenon. And as long as science doesn't do it, it will remain in the supernatural, superstitious, a lot of people making business out of it and so on, sectarian movements and whatever. All this is happening. Why? Because the field is left empty by the serious people who should take it into account. Strong message again here from Camille Flammarion. And since we know that his eternal soul survives this dead body, as it pre-existed to it, since we know that indestructible links connect our visible world to the invisible world, since this soul exists today as well as 3 days ago, and it is not impossible that it is currently here before me, you see, I imagine seeing from the spiritual, with spiritual eyes, Allan Kardec in front of Camille Flammarion, maybe even behind, inspiring him to doing this speech. It's absolutely fantastic. And here you see again strong statements of Camille Flammarion, spiritualist, believing in mediumship and so on. Let us tell him that we did not want to see his bodily image disappear and lock him in his sepulchre without unanimously honoring his works and his memory, without paying a tribute of gratitude to his earthly incarnation, so usefully and so worthily filled. Very strong also. He has raised rivalries. He created a school in somewhat personal form. There is still some division between the spiritualists and the spiritists, believing in reincarnation, the other one not. From now on, gentlemen, this is at least the wish of the friends of truth. We must all be united and by brotherly solidarity, by the same efforts towards the elucidation of the problem, by the general and impersonal desire for truth and good, calling for union between spiritists and spiritualists, amongst others. It has been objected, gentlemen, to our worthy friend, to whom we pay today the last duties. It has been objected to him that he is not what we call the scientist, of not having been first a physicist, naturalist, or astronomer, and to have preferred to constitute a body of moral knowledge before having applied scientific discussion to the reality and the nature of the phenomenon. And that is also a characteristic of Kardec. He did not wait for approval of science. Otherwise, he could have waited until today. There is still no demonstration, no approval of science of the spiritist phenomenon. No, Kardec's mission was really to go quick, fast, until the end, drawing all the philosophical, ethical, and moral consequences out of the facts he was believing according to the hypothesis he accepted coming from the spiritual world, as we have seen. Perhaps, gentlemen, again, Camille Flammarion in his speech, it is better that things started this way. We should not always reject the value of feeling. How many hearts were first consoled by this religious belief? How many tears have been dried? How many consciousnesses opened to the ray of spiritual beauty? Not everyone is happy down here. Many affections have been broken. Many souls have been lulled to sleep by skepticism. Is it nothing to have brought to spiritualism so many beings who were floating in doubts and who no longer loved life, either physical or intellectual? Flammarion here talking about the consoling aspect of Spiritism, and it's deeply true. He was really conscious of all this. Giving here the reason why Kardec was so quick, because his mission was exactly like this. A scientific demonstration, again, if we would have waited 160 years before, if Kardec would have waited, we would not have 40 million adepts of Spiritism nowadays. And clearly, it is better that things started this way, and Camille Flammarion recognized it. Had Allan Kardec been a man of science, he would undoubtedly not have been able to render this first service, and thus spread far and wide like an invitation to all hearts. But he was what I simply call the incarnated common sense, le bon sens incarné. I don't know if the translation is very good. It's really common sense, good sense, a straight and judicious reason. He, without forgetting, applied the intimate indications of common sense to his permanent work. This was not a lesser quality in the order of things which concerns us. It was, we can affirm, the first of all and the most precious, without which the work could not have become popular or cast its immense roots in the world. And here is also, Kardec was always saying this, no, we have to stay quiet, we have to stay the foot on the earth. Don't let us be satellised by the spirits or going into dreams. Let's study it seriously with the feet on the earth. And this is exactly what Camille Flammarion is recognizing here. The first step was to apply the firm reason of simple common sense and to examine the facts according to the principles of the positive method. Positive method that Kardec learned already with Pestalozzi and also with Descartes, and Auguste Comte, who came later on. As the organizer of this slow and difficult study himself predicted, this complex study must now enter its scientific period. The physical phenomenon on which we did not insist at first must become the object of experimental criticism, to which we owe the glory of modern progress and the marvels of electricity and steam. This method should grasp the still mysterious phenomenon in order that we witness, dissect them, measure them, and define them. So, sure, science really has had and still has today to take more interest into these phenomena. Unfortunately, I think Camille Flammarion, you remain with Hofer, saying scientists are not always so neutral and objective and disinterested. And I think he underevaluated this, and that is also probably the reason why, with some exceptions like William Crookes, like Gustave Jolet, like some others, a lot of them did not really make studies. They were simply hunting fraud and whatsoever. And the serious study about the spiritist phenomenon still has to be retaken nowadays in order to understand better, to try also to make a concept and a model of the perispirit, of spiritual body, of this semi-material form of matter in the universe, and so on. There is a lot of things science still today has to go more in depth in the reflections. Okay, so Camille Flammarion was right in saying it must enter in this field, but he was again a little bit too optimistic, saying that this would, bring the results quite quick. And the spirits who inspired Kardec, they knew it, and that's why they told, no, don't wait, otherwise it will be too long. Go until the end, draw all the consequences, and let the science then follow in a couple of decades or couple of centuries to catch up and to confirm all what has been got from the beginning by inspiration and through this common sense. Because, gentlemen, Spiritism is not a religion, but it is a science. You see, another strong point Camille Flammarion understood. A science of which we barely know the ABC. The time of dogmas is over. Nature embraces the universe, and God himself, who was once made in the image of man, can only be considered by modern metaphysics as a spirit in nature. The supernatural does not exist. Manifestations obtained through mediums, such as those of magnetism and somnambulism, are of the natural order and must be strictly subjected to the control of experience. There are no miracles. We are witnessing the dawn of an unknown science. Who could predict what consequences the positive study of this new psychology will lead to in the world of thought? You see, no miracles, no supernatural, God. Stay humble. The phenomena are of a natural order and must be studied more cautiously and openly, neutrally by everyone. It was somehow a message also that Camille Flammarion sent to the followers of Kardec at that time, because a good part of it were already also pushing to this religious aspect, and that was one of the reasons why Flammarion had a little bit, resistance to participate more actively in these movements, and he expressed it very clearly in the speech. Faced with such truths, which are still only partially revealed, how absurd and worthless does a priori negation seem? When we compare the little we know and the smallness of our sphere of perception to the quantity of what exists, we cannot avoid to conclude that we know nothing, and that everything remains to be known. What right do we therefore have to pronounce the word impossible in the face of facts that we observe without being able to discover their unique cause? Again, a very wise advice he gives here. Science opens up to views as authoritative as the previous ones on the phenomena of life and death and on the force that animates us. We just need to observe the circulation of existence. Munir, I think we will have to stop. It's a pity we are just in the middle.
Okay.
He's speaking then about the metamorphosis, reincarnation. The soul has flown away, the body which is recycled by nature, and so on. Shouting here a little bit about the inadmissible dogma of resurrection of the flesh. The body is only transitorily used by the spirit. You see, it's really very, very interesting. But I must admit, sorry, it was a little bit too long. I think I will not be capable to end it, and we will leave for the third emission. Take again this discourse from the part we just stopped right now. Okay. So sorry for being a little bit longer than expected. Thanks a lot for your time and your patience. And again, wishing all the best for everyone.
Thank you, Charles. Yeah, it's a shame that we have to, we've gone over the time, and it's a long discourse. So, and so packed with information. Every line, has something there that we can discuss and learn. And I like very much, what you've shown about Flammarion and how science and spiritism were intertwined in his view, and he was always there, going, his way, and not rejecting one in favor of the other. No, he was not taking sides. He just went there and using his methods, his scientific methods, to give his contribution in science and also regarding the spiritual phenomena. So it's really, really interesting.
And again, I mean, you see, he always say impossible. Huh? He was really open. Huh? Went and observed the phenomenon and was convinced that the phenomenon are happening and authentic. He wrote books out of it, huh? Unknown natural forces and so on. Huh? So he was really far from rejecting everything, like we see from science. So he was honest, even honest in the doubts he had about his own mediumship, saying, I'm not sure it came from a spirit. It may have come from my mind, albeit I admit that the explanation it can come from spirits is valid and is the best one nowadays. He was quite clear. It may seem ambiguous, but it was not, in fact.
Yeah, no preconceived opinions.
Exactly.
He was there open to evaluate, check, and see, what he could accept and what he could not.
Yeah.
And
And
that's
we must also admit that the spiritist body of knowledge spiritism is progressive, as Kardec wrote. A lot of things still can happen and can be discovered. As soon as science really opens more for conceptualizing the spiritual world, I think the inspiration of the spirit will intensify again, and we may have a lot of surprise, even us as the spiritists, a lot of good surprises.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I also want to highlight the effort you've made to translate a book, which is the autobiography of Camille Flammarion, which, as far as we know, has no translation into other language. There's only an edition in French. And for those who don't read in French, so it is an opportunity actually to learn in detail about Camille Flammarion and his perception of the spiritist phenomena and the work of Allan Kardec. So thank you very much indeed, Charles. We have no questions, and just want to say hello and thank Elsa Hossi and Marilda Vega, and we can go to our announcements now. Just briefly mention that next Sunday, the same time, 7 p.m. GMT, we'll have the third and final part of these wonderful presentations by Charles about the biography of Camille Flammarion. And then we start in February, the first Sunday of February, the 4th of February, we will have Alessandro Caldini talking about one of Camille Flammarion's work, which is Death and Its Mystery, Before Death, Proofs of the Existence of the Soul. We are very keen now to learn more about Camille Flammarion's work, the books he published and the work he left to us. And making the announcements of the Spiritist groups, we have the Spiritist Center for Peace with studies on every Wednesday, 12 noon, London time. We study book Heaven and Hell and the Gospel According to Spiritism. And we also have on Saturdays, 10:30 a.m., we have the study of the Mediums book coordinated by Guilherme Dias, Charles Kempf, and myself. So everyone invited to join both the studies on Wednesdays and also on Saturdays. And we are also very grateful to Kardec Radio for allowing us to use the studio to, make this presentation, this series possible. And just a quick, information here. The series about Camille Flammarion is organized by Spiritist Center for Peace, with the support of BUS, the British Union of Spiritist Society, Kardec Radio, and the Spiritist Federation of Ireland, Irish Spiritist Federation. So thank you very much for your presence here today, and see you all next Sunday. Thank you very much, Chance. So
You're
for
welcome.
now,
Thanks for
bye-bye.
having me. All the best. Bye-bye.
All the best. It's a great pleasure.